I don't like that. Sophisticated man, that's who I am. I walk around, I stroll. I look to the left, I look to the right. And when you look back at me, and I say, show you right.
But when you live through the spirit, which is what the problem is now, we don't recognize that we have both physical and spiritual nature.
That's already blessed to you, and the energy that's already here for you, because you are an energy being and you come from an perfect energy source. So all of this stuff is available for you for your benefit.
The Transform You Live Show with your host, Reverend Dr. Marcus Harvey. For more information, visit TransformUpodcast.com. Transform the letter U podcast.com. Visit realmarcushart.com for the exclusive information. Enjoy the show. Let's go.
Hello, my people. And we are back for another amazing show with another amazing guest, even more amazing because, man, I just looked at this guy's resume and it's just blowing me away right now. I'm talking about some transformational stuff, people, some stuff that's, if you start joining in right now, and as you are listening to this conversation, you are going to be like, what is this guy's website? So let's talk a little bit about our guest today. So first of all, he's the Chief Executive Officer of BioQuark Incorporated. Over 30 years of experience across multiple sectors of the pharmaceutical industry, including pharmaceutical commercialization, biotech drug development, managed care, distribution, OTC, and retail. He also served as a VP of business development for a drug development company, raising about $40 million of private equity, consummating over $50 million of licensing deals. I'm talking about huge stuff, my people. He was bringing a lead drug candidate from discovery stage to phase 3 development. Prior to that, he was employed by another big-time pharmaceutical company, SmithKline Beecham Pharmaceuticals, working in the sales, marketing, and business strategy positions. Mr. Pastor, who we're talking about, people, has also served as a VP of corporate development for the pharmacy benefit management company, Prescription Drug Delivery Systems, which was acquired by Stigma Health, of course. He has an MBA from Tampa University. He's a board member of Regenerator HSAPI-DCV, which is another clinical company focused on expedited translational therapeutic applications. I can go on and on and on. This guy's huge list of accomplishments and things he's just a part of, which another big one that sticks out to me is the World Economic Forum's Human Enhancement Council. Let's just bring on, without further ado, Ira Pastor. Hello, Ira.
Hi, Marcus. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. And I just gave a huge bio of yourself, but just in a nutshell, just give us a little bit in your own words about who you are and what you bring into the show.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm a sort of a 30-plus year veteran of, what is traditionally thought of as the pharmaceutical industry and all its sort of ancillary businesses. And after spending that 30 years or so, selling cholesterol-lowering drugs and anti-inflammatories and things like that, I wanted to get back to something that was a little more exciting, a little more transformational, that could really affect a lot more people. So I created this new company that is focused on regenerative medicine and all of the amazing ways that we could potentially repair, regenerate, and rejuvenate human beings. We love studying nature and all of the wonderful species out there, like salamanders as an example, that can lose their spinal cords or their limbs or their eyeballs, parts of their brain, and have them grow back in perfect structure and function. And, I've always been, I joke around, I I always loved science, but at the same time, growing up, I always loved comic books and science fiction, and I always wanted to sort of merge the two together and say, if these little organisms can do this stuff, why not we as humans for the purposes of health, wellness, and the reversal of disease? So that's what I'm involved in nowadays, and it's really a very exciting time in the whole sort of biotech space, in our opinion, and why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Tell me about it. I mean, there's a lot of people jumping on board and very excited about this revolutionary type of science that you're involved in. And, just thinking back, though, when you were at Temple University, initially, what made you decide to go into pharmaceutical in the first place, or just medicine?
Yeah, that was my father, because I grew up in a family. My father was a pharmacist. He had a community pharmacies here in the Philadelphia area, and so I was always hanging around his stores, vacuuming the floor and cleaning the counters and things like that when I was a little boy. So I was always around medicine. I was always around sort of health, and he was a big proponent in the 1960s of generic medications and reducing costs of pharmaceuticals for everybody. And so that really dragged me into it. And, at the same time, when I got to, Rutgers University and started studying as a pharmacist and learning sort of all the science around medicine and medicinal chemistry and things like that, one of the things they still teach you nowadays is about the natural world and all of the, wonderful things that we think of as these high-tech drugs, but they all sort of have their start in nature. Whether those are plants or fungi or bacteria, and we've generated $1 trillion industry just based on some of those learnings. And so I looked at that and said, there's so much more to the natural world that is in front of us that we can learn from. And so this time around, want to start looking at these species and saying, how can we go to that next step, and how can we do some really important things for humans this time?
Definitely, that's what it should be all about, and and that's a very good passion to have. It sounds like. But my question is, knowing that, all of the stigma that's about the pharmaceutical company and companies and industries nowadays, and how we hear that doctors are just telling us to take meds. What point in your life did you feel like, okay, you know what, this is kind of evil, and I should, embark on a different path?
I figured that out when I saw my father die in front of me of cancer of the spine, and when I saw my mother die in front of me from chronic lung disease, and my grandfather die of heart disease, and realized that, even though we were generating $1 trillion a year and spending $200 billion in R&D, we weren't curing the big things that kill us. We were very good at creating drugs that interfered with symptoms, okay? We were very good at doing things for pain and for lowering things like blood pressure and cholesterol. Okay, not a bad start. But when it came to curing, basically eliminating the diseases, the real big things that are what causes our degeneration, our suffering, and our death, Alzheimer's, the cancers, the diabetes, the heart conditions. We have no answers for these. A lot of treatments, but no cures. And so it was really at that point, I said, you know what, I have to do, for my parents' sake, my grandparents' legacy, my children, I have to at least try to do things differently or start create a new industry that is going to do things a little differently. And that was basically the impetus behind it all.
Wow, man, that's very inspirational right there. And the fact that you were interested in comics, you sound like a superhero yourself. I mean, that's definitely usually how superheroes get started. It's usually something tragic that caused them to start doing something to help the rest of the planet. So how much in depth are you, or how hands on are you with the work you are doing right now? And can you give some examples of some of the different things you're working on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very involved in sort of all aspects of the business, being the CEO. So I make the coffee in the morning, and I I vacuum the floor still. But at the same time, I'm involved in the research. I'm involved in sort of the invest with the investors and all other aspects of the business. But at its core, what are we doing? We are focusing on studying how an organism like an amphibian, a salamander, a newt can have its spinal cord chopped in half. And 2 weeks later be walking around and not paralyzed. However, as humans, when that happens, we're in a wheelchair the rest of our lives.
Right.
We've been studying what are the substances, what are the biologic events that occur in that salamander to allow that to happen. And then ultimately, can we create biologic interventions, drugs, other forms of biologics that can stimulate that in humans? Because we as humans don't have these capabilities. And then there's obviously some further out abilities beyond regeneration. You have species that, for instance, shrug off cancer like it was the common cold and don't die of cancer like we do. 8 million of us die of cancer every year. We study how species like flatworms get cancer and then get rid of it in a matter of weeks. And the last thing we study organisms that don't age. There are many species on this planet that live 500, 1,000, 5,000 years in a young state. We want to know how that happens and why we, with our frail, we get on average around 75 years on this planet and then leave. How we can at least start to bridge some of that gap. So we're very focused on developing biologics and other sort of biochemical moieties that can stimulate these types of regeneration, repair, and rejuvenation effects in humans. So we've been a lot of time studying mammals, rats and cats and guinea pigs, rabbits, and slowly now we are making the transition into humans to study how we can ultimately translate what has only been, the sort of capability of these lower species and how we do it as humans, but not for the purposes of, creating real superheroes, but how we can regenerate the brain in someone with Alzheimer's disease, how we can regenerate the heart in someone whose heart is failing, and how we can eliminate cancer. So this is our main focus as a healthcare company. And then, of course, people ask about aging. And aging is, that's a trickle down that comes later from the work we do. But, hey, if we can get rid of all these chronic diseases, you're going to live a much longer and healthier life. We talk about, making 90 the new 30.
Wow, I like that. That's I'm in my 30s now and I'm enjoying it. So to have that prolonged, that'd be great. So in thinking about age reversal, and we see, especially in this, with among celebrities, they invest so much money in plastic surgery, and we know that it's getting kind of riskier now with like the different implants, and tell us a little bit more about your age reversal work and how we might be able to just, take people away from investing in risky procedures and all of this different cosmetic and beauty supply stuff.
Right. I mean, that's a wonderful example. So sort of the state of the art is either implants with, pretty toxic materials, or things like Botox, which is multi-billion-dollar industry, but in essence is just a very potent, poisonous neurotoxin that kills your nerves and so forth. What we were doing on the age reversal front is basically studying the one place in humans where age is reversed, and that is in the human egg. So at the point that all of us, you, me, everyone that is listening, were initially formed or created in our mother's womb, our age was reversed. That is why, our parents of age, whatever they were, give birth to a 0-year-old baby. And that is also why babies are not born with chronic diseases of old age. You never see a baby that's ever born with Alzheimer's disease, as an example. So we study what are called the reprogramming, the cell reprogramming dynamics that occur at that very early stage in life, and we study the substances that are responsible for it, and then we are taking those substances and creating biologics that can do that same thing in the rest of our cells. Because even though you and I are all made of 50 trillion cells, we all started off as one. and we all have the same genome in that one cell and the 50 trillion that became us. So our cells know this chemistry, they know this biology, and it's just a matter of sort of reawakening and reconnecting with what we once saw when we were first created in the rest of our body, and sort of the rejuvenation effects that occurred then for bringing them back to the rest of their tissues and organs and so forth. So that has been the main focus of what we do. We're not, a lot of firms look at the sort of the output, they look at the inflammation or the oxidation or all sort of the things that trickle down and happen to us as we age. We're not interested in that. We're interested in the core of how we take a cell that is 90 and how we turn it back to a cell that is 30 and all the changes, the genetic, epigenetic, so forth, changes that occurred in a lifetime and how we erase it and start it.
Wow, amazing. I'm really digging this conversation right now. I want to ask you, definitely, hearing so much about age reversal, I also heard little mentions of like the disease reversal and cancer work. Can you tell us a little bit more about those different types of work as well?
Sure, absolutely. And it's interesting because some of this was originally, and we openly admit that, there's some things here that have been discovered 50 years ago, and we're just sort of taking the next step. Some of this has been very known knowledge. But it was found back in the 1970s here in Philadelphia that embryos, not human embryos, but embryos nonetheless, could be stuffed full of nasty cells like cancer cells, and when the baby guinea pig or the baby rabbit or the baby rat was born in the lab, it did not have cancer. And this is one of the first times we learned of the fact that a regenerating environment, is very good at getting rid of the bad cells it does not need and keeping the good cells it wants. We also see this in regenerating organisms like frogs. You can give them cancer, and they get rid of cancer through the regeneration process. And so what we are doing here, instead of looking at the traditional approaches, which are either the sort of the shotgun chemotherapies, which kill a lot of stuff and kill a lot of the good cells, or even the newer drugs, like some of these smart drugs, which are like sniper rifles, sorry, making all the military, they're more like sniper rifles that are very good at killing a few cells but miss everything else. We're basically saying no. In nature, the species that are resilient and resistant to cancer do not try to kill it. They change it. They take a cancer cell and they turn it back into a normal cell. And this is really important because when we think about cancer, we have this thing growing inside us. We say, okay, it's normal. We want to kill it. We want to cut it out and get rid of it. But when you think about that with other diseases, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you found out tomorrow you have Alzheimer's disease, you're not going to chop up your brain and take it out. You're not going to cut up your pancreas if you find out you have diabetes. We're focusing on changing the cells, turning them back once again from point B to point A, cleaning up the damage and starting time over. And so there's sort of this underlying theme, whether we're talking about regeneration, rejuvenation, or disease reversal, as in this case, of how we basically reverse time, clean up the genetics, the epigenetics, and start that cell over again. And we know from just nature and looking around that this happens throughout nature, and species use this capability for thousands of years to exist very well and healthy on this planet. That's in essence our goal.
That's definitely amazing. And I know once people hear this back, they're going to rewind what you just said over and over again because they're at the edge of their seats and they want to know, is this leading towards possibly a cure?
Everything we do is focused on the cure. And really, what a cure is, and whether that's cancer, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's diabetes, a cure is taking a diseased cell and getting rid of its diseased status, okay, what we'll say about it. If you think about the way drugs currently work today, is they look at that cell as diseased, and they try to nudge it a little bit. If it's making too much of this or not enough of that, they try to stimulate it to do a little more. That's a treatment. A cure is something very different. It is, as we're saying, taking that cell, starting over, cleaning it up, and making it a young, healthy, rejuvenated cell again. So we foresee cures as being sort of the standard moving forward as this technology begins to get into the clinic and then get onto the market. And people ask, well, what about the pharmaceutical industry? What are they going to be doing? Because they don't typically create cures. And I say, yeah, well, most likely what we will see in the coming years as this further develops is really two industries. Mm-hmm. You basically have your traditional pharmaceutical industry that, you take your painkillers and your antibiotics and all the sort of symptomatic stuff. But then you're going to have a separate industry that's focused on curing you. And there'll be some crossover, but at the end of the day, curing is very different than treating. That is our path only. We're not interested in more treatment. The drug industry does that already. We want to get rid of, just like we got rid of, smallpox many decades ago, we want to get rid of Alzheimer's disease. We don't want it to run through hundreds of millions of people like it's predicted to do in the next 10 to 20 years.
Wow, this is definitely great. And, a lot of people may worry and they may say, well, the government's corrupt and pharmaceutical companies, they have so much money, they can just, smash you guys, just like bugs. So what do you say to those people who may, challenge what you're doing and may doubt that, like, it's going to go anywhere further than where you're at right now?
Yeah, I'd point to two things. One, I would be more worried from the pharmaceutical industry's perspective, and I was an insider, so I know both sides of the table. I'd be more worried if it was 30 years ago. But today, the pharmaceutical industry has a big problem. These are now big 50, 60, $70 billion companies. They are losing all of their new products to generic competition, and at the same time, they are promising our friends on Wall Street a certain amount of growth, and they can't achieve that. And so it's not the case that they can squash us anymore because they need us. At the end of the day, their future depends on investing and supporting technologies like this and not burying them anymore, because they've unfortunately gotten too big, and they've also gotten rid of the one thing they used to do good, which is research. And now they're basically these huge marketing shells. On the other hand, when you kind of talk about sort of the regulatory situation, once again, this is a very different time. And while sort of most companies used to focus only on the United States market, and we are a U.S.-based company, the really smart people now tell you that, look, if you're not focusing on the rest of the world in the next 10, 20 years, and, as important as the United States is, if you're not looking at, Indonesia and Turkey and Colombia and many other developing countries that are coming online very rapidly with their pharmaceutical industries, you're missing the big picture. And so we are active not just in the U.S., but we are partnering up with many groups outside of the U.S. to move these projects along. So, hey, if things slow down for one reason or another at home, we are very active in the Middle East. We're very active in Southeast Asia, South America. We're moving the projects forward from a global perspective because we're going to affect 7 billion people ultimately as all these diseases trickle down throughout the world. So we're very comfortable on both sort of the competitive and regulatory fronts.
That's great, man. It's very good that you are being very innovative and really taking an Aquarian approach to, looking at the big picture and seeing that, we need to reach out to people overseas as well, partner up with those people and make sure that we kind of offer this to the world and not just one small aspect of the picture. So It's very appreciated and very commendable of you. And it sounds very compassionate too. And speaking of which, there's it's so hard for patients dying of like incurable diseases to get into like compassionate use programs. So what are some of your solutions to this, or what are the solutions to this?
Well, yeah, I mean the compassionate use situation is something that we talk about a lot. One thing I just like to say now, putting my company aside for a second, I strongly encourage everybody to become familiar at least with the clinicaltrials.gov website that is run by our National Institutes of Health. It's lists all clinical trials that occur everywhere in the world. So, if you find out, God forbid, one day you have, pancreatic cancer, you know where to go and where to look for clinical trials when when sort of current therapy runs its course. However, on top of that, I mean, one of the main things, and this sort of feeds back into what we're talking about, is really understanding that we're in an era of globalized medical research and training. And you see things now, you see, for instance, Harvard Medical School operating in the country of Dubai, or Weill Cornell Medical in Qatar, or Newcastle Medical School from the UK in Malaysia. You're beginning to see how a bunch of, first world sort of institutions are permeating the rest of the world now. And this is no longer, hey, I have to just look for in my backyard here at wherever I am for a clinical study, and if there's no option, I'm dead or I'm done. You have to look everywhere. You have to be open to exploring this whole sort of clinical space, because far too many people do. It's estimated that less than 5% of everyone that has cancer, is diagnosed with cancer, ever even looks for a clinical trial to get into. This is no good. We need to really increase awareness and understanding that there's a much larger system out there of possibilities beyond that point where your doctor says, my current drug won't do anything more for you. And this is really an interesting time. And I just like to point, it's one really recent example. Merck, the fifth largest drug company in the world, recently did a collaboration with the government of China to make its cancer drugs, its unapproved cancer drug, available on a tropical island off the coast of China. And, I say to myself, if the fifth largest drug company in the world, partnering with the largest government in the world, is willing to take these types of steps for patients that are dying and don't have options, we're really in a new, very interesting era of biomedical research. So it's an exciting time.
Exactly. That definitely is amazing and very exciting. And the fact that you mentioned that 5% of the population, of people with cancer don't even know that clinical trials exist. Wow. We definitely got to do our due diligence to get this message out to many. And I hope many people will, get to hear you a lot more and, hear more about your company. So going back to you, though, what inspires you and what keeps you going from day to day with this battle, man?
Right now, as I said before, I was smacked in the face by the deaths of my grandparents and my parents, and realized the big issues that we weren't dealing with. But now I have 3 younger ones and a lovely wife, of course, that the future is all about. I mean, the children are the future. I want them to live long, healthy, prosperous lives. And I want to create at least one path. I mean, obviously I'm sitting here. I can't do much about agriculture or energy production or, global warming as a technology from a technology perspective, but I can do things for their health. And so I wake up every day and I see them there, and that pushes me forward. And, when my little daughter says, Daddy's going to, cure cancer, that gives me that extra push. And that's what I'm all about nowadays.
That's beautiful, man. It's definitely about the future, and if we're not being selfless enough to consider those coming after us, what are we doing really?
Right.
So speaking of age, once you're 80 years old, what's going to matter to you the most? Looking back on your work, and where do you hope your work to be once you reach up in age?
Oh, well, I'm 49 now, so when I'm 80, I hope everything that I'm doing now will have worked, and that at 80 I will be I'll still feel 49, and I will be physically capable and vibrant and rejuvenated via our company's discoveries and technologies. But once again, for me, it's all about my family right now. I want them to have a good future. I want to have impacted their lives in a positive way through this research, so that they're 45, 43, and 41 at that point in time. I can be. They can be proud of me, and I can be happy that I created a new. I was involved in creating a new world for them.
That's great, man. So just to give us a quick look inside peek, because we got a little bit of time left yet. So what's a day-to-day typical they look like in the lab, or if there's even a lab, what does it look like inside a BioQuark day-to-day?
BioQuark is, I joke around a lot, aside from, the typical lab stuff, it's kind of like a zoo, right? We have fish, we have frogs, we have salamanders, we've had rats and cats and rabbits. We actually had a shark at one point.
Oh, really?
Sharks are fascinating creatures. They were around before the dinosaurs, and they have fascinating ability to regrow things like teeth, and also sort of purify their blood. We also have some sort of lower marine organisms. Sometimes we study some of these clams that live 500 years lifespan. So yeah, it's like a nice petting zoo. That's what it is.
That's cool.
And we spend time, just doing a lot of traditional biology work. Things you would find in any pharmaceutical company, plus a little more. You see some of the tools of zoology and embryology around. We don't do any clinical work at our lab, of course. We're not a clinical company. We partner with other organizations for that. And then we outsource other technology we don't have in-house. But it's very sort of straightforward. But it's exciting. It's not a boring lab with just a bunch of chemicals around. Between the mice and the frogs, you can feel like you're in a rainforest.
Man, it actually gets me kind of excited. I really would like to check it out. If I'm ever in Philadelphia, man, I'm knocking on the door like, you got to let me in. Yeah, so, well, with a little bit of time left, what final words of wisdom or just some good words to offer or something to leave behind, for our audience here today?
Sure. I love to point out that, although this industry in the past has been seen as, either boring or evil or, promising things that are, going to be $2 million a shot and 30 years away, I really like to point out that from a biological perspective, we are on the forefront of really improving humanity. And whether we're talking about the 100,000 people that we lose every day from age-related diseases, or even the 50,000 that we lose every day from acute trauma, it's really well within our intellectual capacity today to solve these problems. And so, if we take the right approaches and sort of think outside the box from the old traps of how the way the pharmaceutical industries work, the old regulatory systems, we are going to be doing some amazing things in the coming years. And I think it's a very exciting time for human health.
Wow, that's good. And I like the fact that your last name's Pastor, that just really goes well with you, and I'm sure you come from a good family too, man. It sounds like
Absolutely.
You come from a very good family. And if anyone want to get connected with you or find more about BioQuark, what's the best way to do so?
Just come to www.bioquark.com. You can learn everything we're doing. We're a pretty transparent and open company. Reach out. Any questions? Use the website and answer. Send questions. Contact me directly. I'm a pretty easy guy to get. We love to spread the word and spread the message. We're passionate about what we're doing, and we want to create a bright future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Pastor. And just for those who are out there listening right now, I always like to say watching for some strange reason. But for those who are listening, if you want more information and you need to get that website again, it will be listed on the transformubroadcast.com website. Once again, that's transformubroadcast.com. We do a live podcast every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And randomly, we do post episodes on, so make sure you check our listings and check your local listings if you are in the Wisconsin area, because we are now on WXRW 104.1 FM, and we will be live every Saturday at 4 p.m. for our show, Central Standard Time. And if you just missed anything, if you want to replay this over and over again, I encourage you to do so. And at the same time, make sure you are sharing with a friend, sharing with a family member, sharing with those who just listen to whatever you have to say. But that's all we have for you today. Many blessings, peace, and lots of love.